So the first thing to point out with this film is that it is just big, dumb fun. And that's what it's meant to do, that's what it is. So there isn't too much that should be taken too seriously in this film. And I'm talking about everything from the plot to the dialogue to the science to the content. All of it is meant just to be fun and silly. There's nothing meant to be offensive or over the top or particularly nasty. It's just entertainment. Okay, so with that in mind, let's talk about the violence. The violence is global. It's mass destruction. It's huge, big, global size devastation. Things get completely destroyed and big things as well. So you see entire cities where bridges and aircraft and cars and people and buildings are kind of sucked up into the air and then thrown to the ground, where buildings collapse. So it's that super, super, super huge level of mass global destruction and devastation. So with that, yeah, you assume that there is a lot of victims and there's been a huge amount of loss as a result of all of this destruction. But the film doesn't kind of treat it that way. It treats the devastation as being kind of victimless. So you don't get that sense of like, oh, lots of people have died. It's just, crash bang, woohoo, that was awesome. There's a few battles that happen, mostly in space or in the air. So there's a few aircraft kind of conflict scenes, and there's air crashes that you do see aircraft crashing to the ground. So you'd be aware of that if you have a fear of falling or a fear of flying, or of course a fear of crashing. So there's a few air-related incidents. There's quite a few actually. In fact, at one point in the film, it's almost like watching Star Wars all of a sudden. Very, very heavy artillery or sort of gunfire. And this is something which I'd say is pretty common and frequent through the entire film. There's a lot of gunfire. They're kind of alien laser kind of guns, but they sort of go off all through the film. There's all this gunfire, this shooting happening. And as I said, really at one point, it's just like watching a Star Wars battle. So yeah, that should give you a sense of just how massive it is. In terms of like the one-to-one, personal stuff, there is a big control tower which is blasted, and yes, you do very specifically understand that the tower was filled with people. One of the characters has a relative in the tower, so you get that kind of sense of loss. In another scene, a character watches his mother fall to what must be her certain death. In a third scene, there's a character who watches her father die. So this is where I guess the relationship building happens in terms of the violence in the film. But in terms of that sort of, close quarter kind of violence, there isn't a whole lot. One character is punched. There is one character that you do see has been shot. You don't really see, you see a shootout happen. You don't see them actually take the bullet wound, but you see them lying on the ground with some blood on their shirt, and then they pass away. But that really is it. The other kind of violence you see is more to do with the aliens. The aliens in this film are incredible. They're huge and very, very detailed. So, but you do see them suffer a little bit of violence. So you see them being shot, you see one being beheaded, quite a few tentacles are cut off, and one alien is stabbed with these machete-like swords stabbed in the back. I think that happens to a few of them actually. So that's kind of the violence. As I said, it's very light-hearted. It isn't meant to be even squeamish. It's not gory. It seems almost victimless despite the level, the scale of this global devastation. So moving on to the sex and nudity, there's no sex in the film. There's a few mild innuendo references, a bit of jokey kind of banter. I think most of it would actually go over most people's heads, let alone children. So it's supposed to be kind of wink, wink, nudge, nudge sort of fun, but it doesn't happen very often. There is one weird little comment which is made, and I found it to be a little bit out of place, where an adult speaks to a child, and the child seems to be about maybe 13, 11 to 12, 13 years old. And this adult asks where another adult is, and the child says, oh, he's gone off to have sex with his girlfriend. And look, I have absolutely no doubt that that is the sort of thing that a 13-year-old boy might think is funny to say back to an adult, but I don't know, I just thought it was out of place in this film. But other than that, there's no actual sex. There is a couple that kiss at one point in the film. And there's a tiny little bit of like, not even skimpy clothing, maybe loose-fitting clothing, perhaps some cleavage, but that's really it in terms of the sex and nudity in the film. Onto the alcohol and drugs. There's no drugs at all anywhere in the film. I think medication, there's a reference there, but certainly no illegal drugs. There's a bit of alcohol. In one scene, you see some men drinking spirits, and it shows them again later in the film, and they seem to be quite intoxicated, but they're having a great time. It's a kind of a positive thing. It's not in any way, it's just to try and score a laugh. It's not meant to be upsetting or anything. And finally, onto the swearing. There's a bit of swearing in the film. There's a few S words and a few A words, a few B words. The word butt is also used, and there's one obscene finger gesture. You also see a man urinating on some property. But again, that is it, really. So overall, in terms of content, I mean, I don't know how family friendly I'd call it, but I guess it depends on what kind of thing that you are into and your children are into. If they like that, you know, throwaway, big budget, this is very blockbuster. If that's a sort of spectacle that you think, you know, you'd enjoy, then by all means enjoy it. I mean, there is a little bit of swearing, as I said. I took my 8-year-old to the screening and he just thought it was brilliant. And in fact, if anything, he loved the aliens. One particular alien in it is so over the top and almost scary, but at the same time just awe-inspiring. He just found himself staring at the screen at this incredible alien queen. So he was quite enraptured, and he's been talking about the film ever since. So he happened to really enjoy it. But, you know, if that gives you any help on whether you want to decide to take your kids or not. If you do, go enjoy the film. Let me know what you think. There's a more detailed breakdown of the film on the website, cinemum.net. But before you go and check that out, please take a moment to subscribe.